is. They're really now talking about a very long period online. So yeah, we really don't know. Michelle, how you been?
Hi, I'm good. There was a lot of things happening during these times, and while so many people told me like I kind of get bored, I don't know what to do, and I was like, how? Because we've been working on this one, and then of course starting with Rubix to go online. So slowly moving everything there.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting, and yeah, I also have on my list to get a closer look at your book. I still haven't managed to do that except the description.
Which
Um,
one?
the last one, L'éloge du vide.
Uh huh. Yeah.
Uh, there's a
Yeah.
thing. Oh, hi, Tina. Wait, you're still on mute?
Can hear. Can hear you.
Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Beautiful. Good to see you all.
Hello.
Okay. How are you today?
Good, good. It's we've had amazing weather here in Lyon, and now that it's out of confinement, it's really lovely to get outside as much as possible. So I am absolutely not complaining.
That's wonderful.
All right, so I think we can start with some housekeeping questions that our audience might have. So this video, this talk is going to be recorded, and we're going to post later the video online. And as for those who do not speak, we would ask to mute their microphones so we can have a very good sound on our recording. Also, regarding the questions, we have some questions prepared for our speakers, but obviously we encourage you to stay till the end of the session. And if your question was not answered by the speakers, we would invite you either to type it in or to ask it in person, and our amazing guests would be able to answer that. So we would start today with a bit of introduction of why we're gathering here. So this is the second episode of the post-COVID talks with experts. We launched several weeks ago with a talk which was on the social movements and the future of freedoms. This is a second episode devoted a bit more to personal, interpersonal feelings and sides effects of the COVID situation. We will try to explore this, and we will do this exploration with two other speakers that I will right now ask to introduce themselves, and also a small question, because we're going to talk about purpose a little bit, and I know that purpose is such a abstract sometimes definition. So if you can introduce yourself and also give a little bit of your understanding of what purpose means for you, so we can take this into consideration while we talking about it during this session. So I'm gonna give the word to Martina. You can start with the introduction.
Sure. So hi everyone. It's good to see you all online. So my name is Martina Buchal. I am an international award-winning speaker, coach, and consultant. And generally, my work is with leadership that is aspirational and purpose-driven. So the fact that you ask about purpose right off the bat is amazing to see. Essentially, what I do in my work is I aim to elevate the status quo. So my hope is that we can align the world's leadership, starting with our young leaders and our young change makers, to really embody who we need to become to change ourselves as people through personal development, through personal knowledge, and develop into the leaders that the world needs in order to be more sustainable, to be more humane, more human in a lot of ways. So that's my day-to-day. That's what I do on a daily basis. In terms of purpose and what I believe purpose to be, purpose for me is it's what I came to this world to do. It's what anybody has within themselves to bring to the world. It's a gift. It's something that I believe everyone has. It's something that can be uncovered and discovered. And I believe that purpose is also a journey. It's not necessarily something that we're perpetually in touch with. And I don't think it's something that's static. I think it can change over time. That maybe, when I was younger, my purpose was to be a loving, caring daughter, for my parents, and a great big sister to my brother. But as I evolved into a younger adult, I realized that actually social justice is so important to me and leadership is important to me. And so my purpose journey has actually been developing more and more. I understand now that my purpose is to care for and care with others and to empower others. But that's something that I trust that I know now to be true for me, and that will continue to evolve for me as I continue to get to know myself more and more. So purpose is discovery of the self and then living from what we discover in there as our gifts and our values.
Thank you so much, Gael. If you can take a lead on introducing yourself.
Yes, my name is Gael. I'm a sociologist. I work at the University of Geneva, and my topic is happiness. So I try to understand what makes people be and feel happy. What are the conditions in society for people to thrive? So that's essentially it. I collect a lot of data, and I try to see, okay, why are this group of individuals happy? Why are they happy in this country, and so on and so on. So it's really a lot about analytics, but so it's not sexy on a day-to-day basis, but it's sexy when you take the overall picture. In terms of purpose, so I can relate with what Martina said. I really think there's a bit of something inside yourself as well. I think it's something within you. I do believe also about something about discovering. What I would like maybe to add is I think purpose is kind of a story. You kind of tell yourself, repeat yourself, and that can put your life in a consistent way. You say, okay, that's my frame at the moment. That's what my life is about, and in a way, and it's true. It's kind of dynamic. My purpose now is not the one it used to be 10 years ago, or the one it will be in 10 years. But it also requires some efforts, to adjust, to take all these new elements of your life into your new purpose. So, yeah, kind of a story you tell yourself every day.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's will be helpful during this conversation because we're going to use this abstract definition several times over the course of our discussion. And I would like to welcome everyone who just joined our conversation. And just to remind that today we're going to talk about, it's the second episode, and we're talking about the psychological effects of the COVID situation, interpersonal, the future of interpersonal relations, whether it's changed or not. So certainly the past 3-4 months have had an effect on the majority of countries, and many claims that the world will never be the same as we are shaping new standards of a kind of new world. And self-isolation and social distancing dictate a new norm for behavior in a society. Many believe that this pandemic has forever changed the society, the way we communicate, the way we hang out, the way we work, educate ourselves, and live in general. While some people claim that post-COVID period will create perfect conditions for prosperity of a more autonomous lifestyle, create a generation of digital nomads, freelancers, those who work remotely, those who believe in online education and use it, and probably the power of social media as a new medium. Others believe that such introverted lifestyle will lead to an emotional blockage and depression and a loss of hope. And some people say that things will get back to normal and we will forget about pandemic as it has never happened. So it's hard to project the future, but we can say one thing for sure, that pandemic created a vacuum for rethinking and rediscovery of ourselves in the society. I personally heard a lot of people telling about a complete new perception of their time, of their life, the value, the awakening in some sort, a new meaningful and conscious existence. So in this regard, I wanted to ask you about your thoughts on societal change caused by the pandemic. Is it a reality or a myth? Could these past 3-4 months change the way we behave forever? And if it could, are we changing for good and making a step towards a society of purpose or not? And whoever wants to take a lead on this, answering this question, you can start.
I'm looking, I don't see volunteering. I'll go first. So just to make sure that I understand the question, you're asking about sort of societal trends and where are we going? Are we going somewhere positive, or do we have the potential to spiral potentially into something not so good? So I think it's really important to start by defining who it is that we're talking about. Because although COVID is an international phenomenon, people in different places are affected in completely different ways. There are societies that have been very hard hit. There are some places that haven't even seen a case of COVID. There's also you mentioned, for example, the introverted lifestyle. On an individual basis, people are affected very differently too. So, I do coaching and consulting work, and it's amazing to see the difference between some people's reaction to confinement, for example. So I'm based in France right now, and so we were in confinement since the end of February, I believe. I don't want to lie to you. And there were people who initially really panicked. People who are very connected to their families, who are used to social interaction, whose jobs were on the line, potentially. Those people felt a great sense of fear, trepidation, anxiety, what is happening? Then I had certain friends or, clients as well, who were thrilled that all of a sudden there wasn't this social pressure to constantly go outside and be around people, who were happy that they could be working from home. So I think that we get a little bit of everything in the midst of this. I think what COVID has done for a lot of people is really put a spotlight on, where they spend their time, how they spend their time, and what things we take for granted and don't. So, I can say that I'm very lucky. I do most of my work online. So yes, I had some speaking engagements canceled here and there, but generally speaking, I could continue working. Is that a generational thing? Is it because I'm younger, I'm more internet savvy, I've spent most of my life on the internet? So there are different reactions for many different types of people. What I have seen, and I think I've seen very clearly, is the fact that we've in many places had a confinement, right? Some sort of lockdown or people sort of retreating into their homes. It means that people are much more aware of what is happening in their home lives, whether they're satisfied, dissatisfied there. And so that can be a great thing if you've got a great family unit, if you're in a good situation at home. It also has given rise to domestic abuse cases globally, right? Because if you're already living in an abusive situation, it's certainly not going to get better by being locked in the house with your abuser. So there have been a lot more reports for mental health cases, domestic abuse cases. Those kinds of things are terrifying. What is the silver lining on discovering what is actually happening in our home lives and in our work lives as well is that we can decide for ourselves whether those things are good, whether they're bad, and whether we want to do something about them. So knowing that these statistics, are coming up, that the domestic abuse rates, the mental health cases, all of this, we as a society get to see, what have we built up until now? What have we let pass? What have we let slide? Who have we not stood up for? Who have we not been there for? And are we okay with continuing to do that? Are we okay with living with the status quo, or do we want to do something differently? Because now we have no excuse. We're all on the internet. We're all watching the news. We can see how leadership is responding, whether we're talking about corporate situations or we're talking about public health responses, government responses. We're all really being mirrored back what our society is about. And I think as a global community are in a point where we can start making some much more powerful decisions from a place of knowing more and more. And for those for whom this has been a quieter time, who have taken this as a point of reflection, the movements that come out of this, I believe, are going to be much more powerful because we have a lot of information at our disposal. We are getting a lot more savvy. And even people who weren't on the internet so much before, now are online no matter what. I know my grandmother who just turned 70, she's on Skype every day. She's researching things. So we're really seeing the power of the internet in all of this too, and how it can mobilize and educate. So I'm really curious to see how we move forward with that. I hope and feel that positivity will come from this, but I'm also on the side of positivity, right? I live in my little silo, my bubble of change makers, and I fully believe in the capacity of creating change because that's what we want.
Thank you so much, Gael. Would you like to add something to this point?
So, going back to your questions, back to normal, certainly not. I do not believe in it. Even if there can be some back movements, I think this will leave a trace individually and collectively. What trace is that? That's maybe we can discuss today. So at the individual level, I think it is indeed fair to think of look at what situations, individual idiosyncratic situations. You can sit for instance, at the university. Most professors had an okay time during the university professors because they live in a rather big house with a rather good wage and so on and so on. Probably some even said, yeah, that was, I could take a breath, I could stop a little. It wasn't the case for students, for instance, who were, sometimes piled in small surfaces, had to do homework, sometimes faced financial issues. We saw it. So definitely, it actually, I think the coronavirus crisis really revealed subsequent or subjacent, dynamics. The one that were fragile got even more, and the one that were actually in a good position in society even made it a bit romantic. They had this romantic apéro and so on. And but certainly that was there were very, very different situations. Then I think it's important to really know what's going to come out of it. It's how do we take all this politically? What are how are the changes at collective levels aggregated and made? This is really harder to kind of predict, because this will be a kind of country by country. I think it will get. I'm pretty sure it will get better in some parts, because the leaders will take into account the new aspirations, because new aspirations came out of this situation. People thought, okay, I need more time. I need to do less, I don't know, maybe earn less money but spend more time with my kids. Or I have a friend, he's in real estate. I called him after a week. He's been busy for years. After a week, he called me and said, okay, I quit. I'm just going to quit my job because my job is about making rich people richer. And that was just after a week, because he was on the side, he had time to think. So I think if we aggregate these aspirations, something positive might come out of it. But we can also think that in some other parts or in some other societies, it will just get it will just get worse, because leaders realize they can also take back the I don't know, the data for health reasons. They can take the whatever the lead on the situation. So I really think both at an individual level, let's see what we all take out of it. I think I see some positive things for me, that again, the relation to time and so on. But politically, I don't know. I think it's going to be and right now is a very important time to decide what we'll do out of it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's that's very good to hear from you, your point of view. And as we continue talking, we heard a lot that about the new norms, and that's something that you already started talking about. And as you, Martina, said, there are some things that comes up which are ugly, and it's something that definitely requires us to be placed into some action. So some suggest that our life will be more controlled also by the surveillance, by the new digital means introduced by the government, because in that period they also tested some things. Here in Russia, and I know that in France you've been also going through the digital passes and the additional control that might be left for us after the pandemic goes away. So what do you think? Should we expect the change in our perception of an experience of freedom as well? All the travel bans and this kind of controlling means that been introduced, would they have consequences, and would they become such a new norm? Gael, would you like to?
So really this is about how do we crystallize all of this into something new? What is it gonna boil down to? There are certainly threats. Let's not hide them. There are certainly threats in collecting all this amount of data and doing all, knowing exactly where people are doing what and so on and so on. The way they're gonna, I really think society is kind of a perpetual fight, not necessarily a physical one, but there are groups fighting each other, values fighting each other, priorities, and so on and so on. And the priorities, the values of the moment kind of decide in which direction these political measures fall, So it's very important that citizens realize it, because typically data is a very unsexy topic. I mean, it's not something you want to read. It's not something you want to really hear about. What do they do with my data, and so on and so on. And though it conditions so much, about our future. We've seen all these movies, right? I'm thinking of Matrix, but also all these Black Mirror episodes, all this dystopia. Really, there are scenarios for which, if we do not realize, if we do not fight for what's going to be done with our data, we can be manipulated. We can be, and it's already being done. I mean, leaders, opinion leaders are being shot or whatever, put in prison or anything. So there are definitely threats in that regard. There are also, on the other hand, we can see great opportunities. Many people have written about all this data that we're sort of giving away. At the moment, we do not get anything in return. But if you think of, I don't know, I'm thinking of Jeremy Rifkin. What he's saying is that we could actually have an income, against our data. We could give our data anonymized with the consent of giving some part of it, not everything, and in return have a lot of things for free because they represent a value. So again, what will be done? Data are a crucial topic, and what will be done with them will be decided. Is being decided at the moment. and will be decided in the coming months.
Thank you, Martina.
So I completely agree. The data questions are going to be big and really important going forward. I want to touch on a part of your question that really captivated me because I'm not the data expert, but that notion of freedom for me is a really important concept, and it's been something that historically has mobilized societies, and it's a really beautiful topic. It's a really beautiful thing to feel that we are free, that we can do all that we want to do and want to be able to do. And also the nature of politics and the state is that we as citizens give up some of our freedoms in order to be protected by and governed by the state. That has always been the social contract between nations and citizens to some extent. I think what we have before us is a potential reevaluation of that social contract. I think what I'm seeing in the US, and I'll speak for myself, and in some other countries in the world, is that people are really questioning democracy and whether democracy is truly representative of people's values, and whether that give and take of the social contract is really what people feel that they have signed up for. Is it still, a give and take, or is the government moving a little bit too close into the power and control side? I haven't seen examples where it's gone in the other direction. I'm happy to be opposed on that. But I think what I'm seeing more and more of is people standing up and saying, hey, I feel like as a citizen of this country, of the world, I have an inalienable freedom that nobody can take away from me. And yet I see that there are so many limitations on what I'm allowed to do that I have not even been asked about. I did not sign up for this when I was born into this particular country, right? We don't choose what country we're born into. Some people are born into dictatorships and they have absolutely no authority, no choice in what happens in their day-to-day lives. And so what I think will be happening more and more, and what I'm seeing more and more, actually last year at the OECD forum, so the OECD essentially is a massive organization, for those of you who don't know, that works in research and policy globally. And once a year, they have a forum where international leaders and some of the world's biggest researchers come together and they talk about global trends. And one of the biggest, most troubling global trends for leaders around the world right now is lack of trust in government. And we're seeing that globally in a lot of different types of movements, right? But I think what's going to happen at some point, and what might be the deciding factor between whether we go towards positivity and movement towards something that's better, or revolution and deterioration, or potentially violence, it's going to be about that. How does that government and how do the citizens renegotiate that trust, or do they? Because if we can sit down at a table and say, hey, for example, there's a public health crisis right now. I'm watching Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand navigate this beautifully. She's talking about how there is a public health crisis, how she understands that as a leader of a country, there are certain limitations that she has to place on people in order to protect them. She's trying to create a bit of a dialogue as much as she can, as much as any head of state can, I think, between herself and the citizens to say, listen, I know we signed up for a certain type of democracy. I know that as a citizen, you don't expect me to infringe on your rights to this extent and to tell you to stay home and wear a mask and disinfect your hands and all of this. However, please understand that, I'm trying to do the best for you. My team is trying to do the best for you. We're working with the best people. And that empowers citizens to have more of a conversation, to feel like they're involved with their democracy, and importantly, to trust the leadership. So the chances of, a government collapse and violence in New Zealand, probably not very high at this point. But in other countries where leadership is not listening, where they're not explaining, where they're not creating a conversation, that could go sideways. So I'm hoping for more Ardens in the world, more prime ministers of New Zealand type of leadership, than some of the other things that I've been seeing as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I agree with you on that point. Leadership is a very good role model. And my next question would be on the intergenerational relations. So the pandemic in some way affected these intergenerational relations as we were forced to stay away from older people. And there've been a lot of talks. I'm not sure if it's in your country, in our country, there've been a lot of speculation about the topic, about how do we rebuild the relations with the older generation? Do young people would have less time with their grandparents, or would that be still the same? So how the pandemic, you think, affecting close social ties, the family? What is your vision of this? Thank you.
Okay, I'm starting. I think it's been so. There's been some studies already, you know, to try to see how the links have been hit or more or less so. And certainly the elderly have been a group that have been deeply isolated. So some of it for good reason, because they were the most fragile, the most vulnerable population. But I mean, I think again it revealed a lot of things about what I'm talking now from a Western perspective, but what we do to our old people. I mean, it's kind of horrible to think, you know, they were all put in a place a bit outside the cities, and were suffering, you know, the little visits and enormous morbidity. Many people died there. So I think the senior people have been really in danger in this crisis. Then I saw different response to that. Like for instance, my parents are now grandparents, and they were willing to see their grandchildren, you know, keep these social ties and so on. But some others that were really afraid of the little babies or the little children that they saw as a virus carrier. Then the bonds were really kind of disconnected. So I thought it was interesting. You know, there's been all this discussion around physical distancing and social distancing. I do believe it has moved a lot. Martina was talking earlier about everyone being online. I really think that the few last percent that were not online came to use it more and more during the crisis, because simply we had to. Also, I mean, I could say that my mom, she's not an internet lover, but she forced herself to do it a bit more. And so I think it has really, I think society and I think collectively we've done quite a good job to shift part of the physical relationship into virtual relationships, although in my opinion, that doesn't replace it.
Thank you. Yeah. Do you think, just to have like additional questions for you, Gael, because you said that like it's not gonna replace it. Does it mean that we cannot expect the moving 100% to virtual reality? There would be still need, like the basic need for the human interaction.
Definitely. I mean, what you can have a conversation. I mean, we are having a conversation now. We're in very different countries, and you can have a conversation. You cannot have the warmth of social relationships online. You cannot really touch something, you know, see something much deeper, something more profound when you're just calling someone or zooming someone. Or so in that sense, I think communication can go online. I mean, informational communication, but emotional communication goes. I mean, doesn't do a very good job just online. So I think you need also the spontaneity. Is it spontaneity? Yeah, the spontaneity has been, in a Zoom, it's always, or in whatever, it's really much more, you have almost a planning. Now you talk, now you talk, now you talk. The real life is much more spontaneous, it's much more fun. You can see some things and you just react on it. So all of this you cannot have online. You can have a great 2-hour discussion, but you will miss a lot of things.
Yeah, thank you. Also, you already started, both of you already started talking about the politics and the role politics actually should have in this process. But what about the economy? Because this is another area that also been affected a lot by the pandemic, and the economists say that the change has already happened to the world economy, and the way people behave as consumers. They say that we buy less, we pay less, we buy different, and we are saving more. Would that mean that businesses, in your opinion, will have to be reinvented? And if yes, in which way do you think we're going to experience the economy and ourselves as consumers in this new world? Yeah, Gael?
Is it me? Sorry, I thought I was waiting for Martina. So in terms of, I definitely think things will have to change on the business side. I mean, they are already changing. My belief is that the economy, the economical value will be a bit less important. People will give a bit less importance to everything money-wise than they used to. I mean, for instance, conspicuous consumption. The consumption you do to impress others. I mean, I don't know if it's a hope or a think, but I think this should go down. I think this should be over. But so potentially, people could try to realize that they need a bit less money. I mean, I'm not talking about a third of what you used to have. But if you consume really for what matters, you should need to earn a bit less. So therefore, you could work a bit less and spend a bit more time. What I'm saying is that all of this is I'm talking about a more frugal economy. An economy. Of course, political leaders at the moment will hate this because I'm talking about an economy that would go down. But I'm also talking about working less, paying less, yes, but living more, loving more, spending more time doing things that matter. I mean, yes, I like my job, I like doing things, but if I really didn't have to pay rent or whatever, would I work as much? No, I would probably work half of it, or 2 days a week, and do some things completely different. Otherwise, I would just write. I would just write books. That's things that I love to do, but they pay very little. If I just had time, that's what I would do. So I think business will have to realize that the money value will just be a part of it, and that people will be expecting other types of value, time value, maybe feeling value. This I think the whole economy will have to shift in a way. Again, I cannot tell you if it's a thinking or wishful thinking. Maybe it's just a hope. That's my hope.
Martina, you work with businesses, and you probably have a very strong opinion. What is your take on the economic side of the effects?
So what's interesting is I actually used to work for the economic division for the Senate of Canada and also for the Embassy of Czech Republic. So in my past life, I actually started off in law and politics before I got into the work that I do. And I have to tell you that even with my background in economics and government, I cannot tell you where this is all going to go. And part of that is because I think it's too soon to actually say what this all will be, especially from country to country. Some countries are right in the midst of the pandemic and in the midst of lockdown. Other countries are migrating sort of out of it and back into something that resembles a new normal. I think it's going to take us a little while to still figure out, you know, what is the economy going to look like. What I will say with the businesses that I work with today is what I'm seeing very clearly is the businesses that have prospered, that have made it to, you know, this far into it, are the ones that got curious and that adapted. I think adaptability, curiosity, and versatility are going to be such big assets going into the future as a business owner, and even for, you know, for entire economies of countries. I'm seeing that there are so many things that we've taken for granted as just obvious. And of course, this industry is always going to exist. And of course, I'm going to go to a restaurant or, you know, movie theaters and what have you. You know, there's so many things that in day-to-day life that were just so common to put our money towards potentially. And in everyone's life, it's different, right? We all have different habits. But I think confinement really showed us that actually, if the whole world shuts down, you know, that all of that is gone, and we, you know, those businesses can either die off because, you know, there's no more work, especially physical businesses like restaurants. And I'll use the restaurant industry here because I'm in France, like land of gastronomy. Everybody loves food here, right? There are 5 to 10 restaurants on any given block here in the center of Lyon. And the restaurants that are doing well right now are the ones that understood very quickly that a change is forthcoming that they don't necessarily understand. And they started asking questions and they started adapting quickly and early on. So it was, okay, so people can't leave their house. How can we still get them our delicious food? And how can we make sure that they know that there's still access to this particular resource? Right. So a lot of these businesses are now going online. They're doing delivery. They're working with other, you know, third-party deliveries like Uber Eats comes to mind, or Deliveroo here is common in France. And so the businesses that are making it, even in industries that are under fire right now, like restaurantation, I don't think that translates into English, like the restaurant industry. Those businesses, you know, the ones that are really thriving are the ones that are adapting. It's as simple as that. And so I think that that is what's going to really define a lot of the economic trends going forward. Who's willing to adapt and change and do something differently? And, you know, I think entrepreneurs can potentially lead a lot of that in coming up with new ideas of things we haven't even considered. You know, Uber Eats existed before the crisis. So, you know, Uber Eats is doing great, but, you know, is there something that we're missing? Is there some other way to deliver, you know, these assets, these things that may enrich our lives in the way that we like, that we don't even know about yet because some really interesting creative entrepreneur hasn't shared it with the world yet? So I'm curious to see what actually comes out about all of this in terms of innovation when it comes to economics and business.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to give the word to Michelle, who's going to lead the conversation further. Thank you.
Thanks, Saida. Yes, so I find this all very interesting. And I also have like one more question, because before we already started talking about the social distancing, that we separated young from old. But I mean, it was not only that, it was also separating us from friends. And we discussed already a little bit on that actually online communication can never replace real life communication. And I mean, we also see the new trends coming up. Just yesterday, I walked into a co-working space to have a look, and I just waved because normally I would go and shake hands, but due to the situation, it was not possible. And someone else came and gave me this elbow greeting. And I mean, there's so many different things. But at the same time, I also received questions from people going like, okay, but isn't it maybe also a little bit like you can develop a psychological fear, or do we have any psychological consequences to this because we have less human contact? And I mean, I experienced it for myself, but I also want to see, how is it in your opinion? Do we face maybe psychological consequences besides depression, maybe also like really the fear of talking to people or any other social anxieties.
Did you want to go first, Gael, or should I go? Okay. So I think a decent indicator in my mind of what could happen going forward is, you mentioned social, and I think what you're alluding to a little bit in there is also like mental health concerns, maybe, is that part of your question as well? Yeah. So there's, the social and psychological consequences of social distancing and what can that mean for people. A good indicator is the past and already what's been happening. So I spent a lot of time studying millennials and the sort of the change maker generation. So millennials and younger, these young people who are out there and are trying to make a difference in the world, and they're different and they're ambitious, and everything that I hear back from high level leadership about these younger generations who are predominantly online, who are, playing a lot more video games, who are on social media, all of that, the statistics point to, and maybe we'll have some backup with our, with a little bit more stats on this, but the statistics really point to the fact that there's a huge cost to being online so much, to having all this online social interaction, but not having one-on-one contact. Social media and phones have been proven to be addictive. So we have, these younger generations who are addicted to their phones, and it's not just younger generations. There are people across every generation that are highly addicted to their phones. But this relationship with technology has become something that has taken over our lives pre-COVID. Right, there were people who were already suffering from social anxiety, depression, and all of these things. And it's actually been proven that younger people have a harder time having one-on-one contact and and lack the sort of this, what seems to be the sort of the core communication skills that past generations who communicated more in group settings and one-on-one naturally adopted through that kind of collaboration. These younger generations don't seem to have that as much. And when I say these younger generations, I'm not exactly young, but I include myself in that. So that, the social impact is there. So if we keep doing that more and more, I can only expect that would be amplified if we don't stop to recognize that we already have addressed this and seen this to be a problem. So how do we change our relationship to technology, to the fact that we're isolated? Fear, of course, is something that can come up in the human psyche. It certainly doesn't help being in situations where, the media can feed us a lot of imagery that is, that is worrisome, that feels damaging or toxic. I know for me personally, I have to have detoxes from my phone, from the internet, from media. I'm really careful about what kind of information I interact with and to what extent, because I can feel it in myself. So speaking purely for myself, I can feel it in myself, how my mood deteriorates, how I become much more pessimistic about the world. And it can easily spiral into a place of hopelessness. There's so many problems out there, and I don't have people that I can sit with over a coffee and just talk through the difficulty of it. It's not the same over Skype or Zoom. So all that to say, that I feel like there are certain indicators that we've already had that show us that if we do too much of this, it's not good for us. I know that if we, if we're smart and anticipating that we'll be doing more and more of this, we can also come up with ways to make it healthier and better and censor for ourselves what it is that we're doing so that it benefits us instead of harms us.
Thank you. So, Gael, what's your perspective on this?
So in terms of, you were asking in terms of data. So we're literally, everyone is just collecting them at the moment. So we do start to have some results of all these surveys. So it depends on the settings, on the countries again, and so on. But there's been depression has increased significantly. They say that depending on the places, but about a third of the people got through mild depression during the coronavirus crisis. It's a lot. I mean, a third. And again, if we look a bit more carefully, the very young and the very old have been hit more. Single people, the poor, of course, because when you're in a smaller surface, smaller apartment, it's harder. So there's been, during the crisis itself, there's been increase in terms of depression. In terms of what effects is it going to leave? Again, this is a speculation, but my take is that for most people will sort of get back to a new normal quite quick, to a certain extent. People, I think, now will be a bit more, I believe, will sort of assess the risks, when they go to a given situation. Typically, I think, also this links back to the previous question on economy. I think large gatherings are going to be a really difficult business in the future because people, it's a bit of a cost-benefit analysis. At some point, people will say, yes, it doesn't matter, I'm going to meet my friends because, I don't see myself living like this, simply this way. So people will meet their friends, people will meet their family, people will meet their close ones. But I don't know, when will they go back to a large festival, a big concert, big football game. That to me, that's not gonna happen so soon. Otherwise said, I think we're really gonna reinvest the close social bonds. Really, people will spend more time with their very close friends, and leave a bit aside uncertain social settings.
Right, thank you. Totally agree. I mean, also, now in perspective that you say, yes, there's probably not gonna be, let's say, big gatherings so soon, no festivals, no concerts, probably also no cinema for quite some time, so date nights will happen differently. While we know that interpersonal relationships of quality, like with friends and family, actually make one of the pillars of happiness, and I think you also said that there are people that might have rethought their values. So just a general question, how do you also think the perception of happiness has changed now also for the individuals?
Okay, I'm going. Certainly, so since the beginning of the conversation, we kind of had this, right? Pros and cons of, what can we do, the crisis. One of the great things I've had during that time was, I had many phone calls, I had many Zooms. One of the things I found was the ability to very quickly move to deep topics, in a usual business or in a usual week or month, when you call people and it's okay, and you want to discuss something deep, people have no time for it. What's the purpose of life? Okay, I gotta go have a meeting, but during that period, I've had really actually these deep discussions I was waiting for with people because they had time. And people were thinking, because people are not stupid. People sometimes might be very busy and, they're in a rush and they have things to do and they have a mortgage and they have a lot of things to do and they run from one place to another. And in sometimes they don't think as much as they would like to. But give them time. And then I really thought and I really observed people trying to say, okay, why am I here? What's my place on earth? Now that I'm not working, now that I'm only partly working, does it really matter? What are my priorities? So at least there's been this focus, which I really see as positive. Regarding our abilities to pursue them in the future, this goes back to the political question, will our political leaders enable us, to pursue life that are a bit more meaningful, will we have to keep running after money, the rat race, keep doing things that are sometimes purely meaningless? So I've seen very positive signs on the individual side. I'm now waiting and pushing for the political and collective side.
Martina, I saw you also getting ready already when Gael started talking, so I'm excited to hear your opinion.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think on the personal side, one thing that you touched on that is really valuable. We're talking about the individual. Obviously, everyone's experience of this is different. But for those who have had more time, if there's one thing that I know about self-awareness and happiness, is self-awareness and happiness are often very tightly linked. If we know ourselves, we can live a life that's integrity with who we are. And that brings a lot of happiness and life satisfaction. Life satisfaction is a lot about, what do I value? What's that purpose of mine? Am I living close to it? Do I feel, in congruence with the way that I live my life on a day-to-day basis? And we don't typically have a whole lot of time to even consider these high-level questions. We're purely involved in, our day-to-day pursuits. If we think about even Maslow's hierarchy of needs, actually, this might be a good place to start, right? If we think about our necessary human needs, survival is number one. If we've got that taken care of, that's amazing. Some people went into hardcore survival mode over COVID, okay? Losing jobs, health scares, all of that stuff. So those people certainly did not have time to think about happiness or life satisfaction. This is, how do I survive as a being, right? But as we move up the pyramid, for the people who have, the basic needs met, then maybe there is a creation of more time, and more potential for reflection and self-awareness. And for those people who could get to that place, and I imagine that that's probably a privileged fraction of society, in the global whole, the people that could go to that place of consideration had a real opportunity to consider, okay, knowing that I have my basic needs met, what really does make me happy? Is it, those conversations over the water cooler at work where we're talking about what the meaning of life is? Is it, coffee time with my friends? Is it my passion, my hobby? Is it music? Is it time in nature? Is it cuisine? Whatever it is, right? But time can create that container for that self-exploration. And for the people who had the benefit of that container, happiness is going to change. I imagine that people will become much happier. You mentioned that you had a colleague that a week into, confinement quit his job because he realized, this is crazy. Why am I doing this? Right? It doesn't take that much time to realize we're out of integrity with who we want to be. But we get so busy on that, on that treadmill of go, 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 and this is my job, and I need to make the money, and I have to do the things, that when we finally have a chance to pause, that's when we really have an opportunity to figure out, A, am I happy? And if I am not, what is it that makes me happy, and how can I do more of that? So the people who have been privileged with that time, I have seen personally around me, people aligning a lot more with who they want to be, what they care about, what they're passionate about. And that might just be on the fundamental level. Like, I discovered I loved gardening through this whole experience. I have a house full of plants now because I realized I love being in touch with nature, and I couldn't be out in nature, so I brought nature home. I literally started planting seeds. Right? So there's, I think for some people who are lucky to have that time, there's a real potential for more connection and more happiness. And if we want to extrapolate that a little bit, and I'll finish on this, happy people, happy individuals, to me, make a happy society. So if we have more happy people, which I hope that we do, I anticipate that we can project that there will be happier, more productive, better societies going forward. That's what I have to say about that.
Thank you. Yeah, fingers crossed. And I mean, I guess there's a clear connection because we are one of the most busiest societies that we have. At the same time, all these societies that are rich very often also have the highest depression rates. But now you talked also, both of you, so much about also the passion and being happy and following what you love. And in the beginning, you also mentioned already purpose. Now, I know that for some people, as you say, it happens very quickly when you have some time to think and you understand, okay, this is not what I want to do. And then they just quit their job and they do other things. And I mean, for myself, I also discovered that I actually love taking care of plants. And I always thought I can't let them survive because normally they die. Now I have like 6 or 7 aloe veras at my home. But also, I guess for many people, there's still the question on, okay, now I know that I actually don't want to live this kind of life, but then they still don't know yet how to approach in order to find out what else is it that they're missing or that they want. So do you have any suggestion on that, on how to approach this?
Can I hop in? I have something that I'm dying to say. So I call that creative tension. I'm not the only person who calls it that, but creative tension, it's sort of the space between the unknown and creating something. So knowing what we don't want is a really good starting point. If people just sat down and created a list of this is what I don't want, this is what's not working in my life right now, and decided that that list was going to be like a compass for their decisions for the next little while. You know, I don't know where I'm going, but I know I'm not going in that direction. Well, that's already facing me this way. That's already bringing me that much closer to things that I enjoy or things that are meaningful to me, to things that matter, right? And then the chances of me on that path discovering the stuff that I really care about are exponentially higher than if I'm stuck over here living this life of not being in an empowered choice around what it is that I'm doing. So even just identifying this isn't working is a good starting point. And I say starting point because, again, sort of how we started, right? This whole purpose, happiness thing, it's a journey. It's a whole bunch of discovery. And if we're approaching it that way, then it can be fun. It can be interesting. It can be driven by curiosity. And on that road, when we're going that way, if we're pursuing passion, if we're taking note of, you know, what makes me excited, what really makes me happy, you know, if we're taking even small moments, it doesn't have to be an entire confinement. If we're taking a few moments every day to just consider what was the joy in my day today? What did I really like? You know, what was fun for me? Did I kill any plants today? No. That means I might like them. Right? But just those little considerations and paying attention to what we really feel on the inside when we consider our lives. Happiness is a very good compass towards good things. And dissatisfaction is a good compass away from things that aren't working from us. Should we still take our reason with us? Yes. Sometimes just because something makes us unhappy doesn't mean that we necessarily need to step away from it. You know, we can think about it and consider it. What about this doesn't make me happy? Maybe I hate my job, but it's not because the job's the problem. Maybe I'm working with somebody who doesn't work for me, right? So it's not, you know, it doesn't feel good, so I won't do it. Let's have some thoughts about it. But once we discover that, no, really, this fundamentally does not work for me, then we're really empowered to make a shift. So I'd say creative tension is actually a really, really good thing.
Thank you. Definitely take that away as a key message today, the creative tension. So, Gael, how do you see it? How would you approach it?
I agree that insatisfaction, in a way, dissatisfaction or incomfort is not so bad. Sometimes it needs to be in a restricted time limit. At the beginning, when I started, at the beginning of my career, I had a lot of these. I said, "Oh, I don't know what I want, but I definitely know I don't want to be here." So I had to change a few times. It wasn't too bad because I realized very quickly. That's the key, I think. I'm quite sure during the summit in Hong Kong, um, I mentioned something about the worst thing being mild comfort, which I call the golden cage. The golden cage is really the worst thing that can happen for your happiness because it's comfortable enough so you're not going to leave it, and but it's not really good, so you're really, really happy. So I think so. Admitting first that you're not in the right place is good. Then maybe a possibility is to surround yourself with people that you kind of admire, that kind of made it, to a purposeful situation, to something that makes sense to them. People that have more energy than you, and you can see that they're doing something better than you. Then you can surround yourself with them, and they can become, role models. And at least, you can touch something, because if you keep being with the people that are doing the things you don't want to see, well, you might very well reproduce this very same mechanisms, and same thing will happen again and again. And as you very quickly mentioned at the beginning, I recently coordinated a book which is called L'éloge de vide. So it's the tribute to emptiness. I believe that emptiness has a role to play there, because if you embrace it, if you embrace that you're not going to find the solution immediately, if you let some vacuum, some emptiness come into your life, then something can emerge. But it's kind of saying that, okay, in comfort might last a while, but if you do not acknowledge it, you will stay in the golden cage forever. So acknowledge in comfort for a while, and embrace emptiness.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I have one more question on a more personal level before we go to the questions of the audience. So I'm actually very curious to hear, during the confinement, during this whole last weeks and months, how have you spent your time? Like, did you let some vacuum in, and what has emerged out of it, and what made you happy?
So, I mean, my quarantine, my confinement was not the most empty it has been, because I just got a baby just before it, so it was I would say it was rather full confinement. The good thing is I could spend time with him, which I normally wouldn't be able to do. So I had half a day at least. I was trying to work in the morning. Had half a day to spend with him, which I wouldn't do, in a normal time. So that was really enjoyable. On the on the other hand, I really try to get myself every day a 1 hour time to call people, because if I was thinking that if I don't do it, you can lose people out of sight. And this way was really, as I said just before, I had the most, at least, purposeful or meaningful conversation on the phone, at least I've had in a while. So, and I actually, a few projects for me came out of it. Emptiness led to a new project. I'm gonna create a publisher house, which I cannot say too much about at the moment, but it really came out of that moment, out of these discussions with other people, and out of that move.
Oh, thank you. I'm very curious to hear and learn more about it when the time is right. Now, Martina, what was it for you?
So when the order first came in that confinement would be happening, I took a moment to think about really what I'd be missing the most. And I like a good Girl Scout, went and I prepared myself. So one of those things was, I'm a nature lover. I love being outside. The park that I live close to, that I spend most of my days in, was closed. I knew I wouldn't have access to it. I literally stayed at the park until the very second that the police came around and told everybody to get out, because I was so committed to maximizing on my nature time. But what I did is I went and I just, I bought a few seeds, and I thought, I'm going to grow some things. I'm going to dedicate some meaningful quality time to doing something that actually runs in my family. So my mom, my grandmother, my great-grandmother all love gardening. Ever since I was young, I was like, not my thing. But something in me just said, garden. So I tried it, loved it, did a lot of gardening, killed a lot of plants, raised a lot of plants. I learned a lot. So there was gardening, and there was also, I realized that I was quite busy with work during the confinement, but I didn't want to set time aside to do something that I typically would put off or haven't done. So I've been journaling now for about 5 years, and I've been thinking about writing a book, and I just thought, this is such a big task. I don't know where to start. I'm not sure what to do. So I had a conversation with one of my mentors at the beginning of confinement, and I said, listen, where would you suggest I start? Because he's written a book before. And he said, commit to your writing. It doesn't have to be a lot, but make sure that you make a commitment to writing, and whatever's in those journals, you need to excavate throughout this time. So I gave myself essentially 3 months to go through all the pages of all of my journals, highlight and find the juicy little pieces, and start to pull together the parts of what will one day be my future book, which is something that otherwise, I was too busy to even consider doing. Interestingly, I wasn't less busy, but I made time for it. So I found out actually it wasn't that I was too busy, it wasn't a priority.
Wow, that's impressive. Really cool to see what you've done over the last few years, like working every day slowly on it, and now kind of harvesting all your work. Of course, not just like plucking it, still gonna, I guess, push some more work in it, some more time. Yeah, but also there. Very, very curious to read that one day. So now that I think Seda and I have come to the end of our questions, but we would love to give space to the audience to ask some more questions. So whoever wants to ask a question, you can unmute yourself, or if you don't want to ask the question, you can also write it into the chat, and then either Saida or I will read it. And also give you some time to start thinking. Otherwise, in case that because you also didn't have the chance to ask each other a question, in case that you have those now, Martina or Gael, feel free to ask any question.
I think we have Swapnil, right?
Yes?
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah, go on. We can hear you if you have a question.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, the question that I would like to ask is, at this COVID-19 has given us, a moment of introspection, to reconsider, our passion and relationship with people. So, do you see a possible change um, in trends of our lifestyle that we are, going in as of now? I read from many articles is that after the Spanish flu, after like the incidents in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there has been change of priorities in the the um, uh, whole human circle, I would say. So, what thoughts you have on the change of trends, or the change of priorities, in terms of our lifestyle?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really good question. I suspect there will be a lot of changes, and it's going to depend on the country, the society, and what's already normal for people. So I suspect that values that are deeply ingrained will become more ingrained in a lot of societies. I imagine people who, for example, have close family bonds, and have been through confinement now, where they haven't been able to see, their loved ones in the way that they would traditionally, for a weekend meal. That tradition is probably going to be that much more ingrained the second this is all over, if it isn't, already. So there's a real chance to actually create more social cohesion because we've experienced what it's like to be apart. And for some people, the real pain of being apart, right? Especially if we're used to that kind of social interaction. I imagine family values will shift as a result of that too. Who we relate to, who we choose to live with, is becoming that much more important, right? We're not going to be so willy-nilly about who we decide to be a roommate now. If we consider that maybe we'll get stuck with them in the same apartment for 3 months. So I think I suspect that there would be more intentionality and more will towards good, strong, valuable bonds, and that's coming from my experience predominantly. Because I know for me, my family matters a lot, my friends matter a lot, and I know that this whole experience has caused me to really sit and think, who matters to me the most? And how do I ensure that I'm spending quality time with those people? How do I make sure that they know that I love them, that I care about them, that they're on my mind, regardless of whether, we get to spend a lot of time together or not? And I know that I'm not alone in that, definitely not in my social circle. I know that's certainly not the case. And, I know that that's the case in my country as well. So yeah, that's what I have for you.
Sure.
So I think, in a way, there's been if you look at the weak signals, because that's all we have at the moment, it's sort of people are really refocusing on, I would say, almost traditional, old-fashioned things we used to think were not cool anymore are becoming cool again. People wanted to move to the city to have the really dynamic and hectic and so on. And now people realize how cool it is to. Martina was talking about gardening. People are trying to say, okay, maybe we can just have a small house on the countryside. It is quite funny. There's been really this metropolization period, cosmopolitan period. Possibly we're going to, a bit more of a neo-village time with more, I don't know, people seeking a house, people seeking gardens, people seeking maybe partners, because they will say, okay, maybe if I have to quarantine again, I might just well be in good company. So very hard to say what's going to go out of it. But they all the real estate agents, not my friend anymore because he's no longer one, but are saying that people will actually be looking for different types of good, different types of houses and apartments. So yeah, maybe again, from a very open period that we've had for so many decades, maybe a bit more of a quality time period.
Any other questions that you have, or we fully answered?
Yeah, I have one follow-up question that I'd like
Sure.
to put forward for our guest for today. The question is, the new form of learning, as we can see as of now, has changed into a more online mode for the matter, and it seems to be a new normal after COVID-19. The whole pandemic gets over. So, if this is accepted globally, do you see that our future generation is moving from a more value-based learning to a content-based learning. So what's your thought on it?
If I may start, Martina. For this, as we've been discussing for a bit more than an hour, I mean, the new norms are hard to kind of imagine. I think for education, this is going to be the new norm. I mean, I have little doubts that online courses will really take over. For that, I have little doubts. If I look at my university, if I look at American universities, are really shifting everything. Conferences, we no longer have conferences. You know, they're all online. They last a day, or so. I think I would take very little risks by saying that we're going to shift towards a very much more online courses.
I'm with you. I think online is going to be increasingly more normal, and I would say if only for the sake of being more stable. And I'll explain what I mean by that because I've done it. So I've taken work that I was doing in person before and switched it to online, and my intention is to do it permanently, or at least semi-permanently, leave it for at least a year and see how it goes. And the reason why is because as a coach, as a consultant, as somebody who, you know, I have people relying on me, and that relationship, that consistency that we build together is so important to me in my work, and the kind of relationship that we have, that I don't want to be shifting things for them. I would love to be the provider of stability and consistency, and to be able to provide a plan for my clients that they can rely on. So if I can say, for a fact, we will be able to meet online for all of our work for the next year, plan it out for them, map it out for them, let them know what that relationship's going to look like, then I feel like I'm doing a greater service for that person, instead of maybe potentially shifting gears before we're fully out of this whole situation. So, you know, my perspective on that is I would understand educators choosing to go online for the mid-range future, and then seeing what happens. I know that there is some loss of content, and, well, not necessarily content, but there's loss of certain modes of learning by taking it online. So, you know, workshops that I host, it's amazing to be able to do it online, but there's nothing like experiential learning in a group where you have that energy, and, you know, you can feel the person next to you's breathing changing, and you know that something's impacting them. You know, there's something really powerful about that group dynamic and learning in that space. It's also a great way to create vulnerability, which also can lead to deeper learning. So as much as I feel that things will continue to go online, I know that there are some things that, in my experience, can't go online in the same way, and that might lead to a countering to that eventually, where people start craving that human interaction and that experience of being in a classroom setting, having that live debate where, yeah, you don't have to wait for somebody to stop speaking so that you can, you know, insert your position. It can be more intuitive. So yes to more online, but I suspect that there might be a bounce back.
Thank you so much.
Do we have any other questions? Anyone? All right. So I think it's been 1 hour, 20 minutes. So I think we discussed a lot. And in case anyone had their question but were shy asking now, you can send them to us so we can forward it to our speakers and get your question answered. And as the history of COVID-19 is still being written, it is hard to say for sure what will be the new norm. But what we know that it's our personal choice to view the confinement as a crisis or an opportunity to become a best version of ourselves. So Today we've learned a lot from both of our amazing speakers, Gael and Martina, and I thank a lot for your time. And I think the whole conversation turned into a very inspirational talk, because the way you perceive this gives a lot of inspiration to other young people who join today, or the one who will see the recording of this conversation, that we can use our time, and we can use this opportunity, and view this time as an opportunity actually, and use it to become better, to come up with something that they had a long time thinking about, but were probably feared or busy to do. So I really, really thank you for such an inspirational conversation. Thank you for your time, for this brilliant answers that you've been giving us. And I hopefully see the rest of you guys in the following episodes of the post-COVID conversation. We're going to also take a look at the digitalization and the future of the businesses and online work in the upcoming weeks. So stay tuned. We're going to send out some information. So I thank you so much. Michelle?
Yes, it's all said. So I just can really thank both of you that you made the time today, that you took the time to share your opinion, your perspective with us. And also thanks to all the participants who made the time tonight to be here. And yeah, if there's anything else, you can always contact us, and we're happy to see you soon again, and hopefully also in person, whenever it's possible. Right.
Well, thank you. So yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for having us.
It was a pleasure. All right, we'll forward. Yes, we'll send you all the information. Goodbye. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.